Thunder shook the glass of the high-rise building. Arya pressed her back against the cold wall of the hallway. Her chest moved up and down fast. She looked down at her wrist. The old silver bracelet gave off a very faint blue glow. She held up her hand. It was gone. She couldn't see her own fingers. The magic worked. As long as the storm raged outside, she was invisible. Footsteps banged on the marble floor behind her. The men her stepbrother sent were close. They wanted her dead. They wanted the family company for themselves. Arya didn't have all her memories, but she knew she had to survive. She ran down the hall and saw a thick wooden door slightly open. She slipped inside, shutting it quietly behind her. She was in a massive bathroom. Dark grey tiles covered the walls. Steam filled the air. Water ran in a huge glass shower in the corner. Arya took a deep breath, trying to calm down. She was safe. No one could see her. She walked closer to the mirror to check her reflection, but nothing was there. Just the empty room. Then the shower water stopped. The glass door opened. Dominic stepped out. He was her boss at the company where she worked as a normal clerk. He was the Billionaire CEO. Water dripped down his chest and over his stomach. He grabbed a black towel and wrapped it around his waist. Arya froze. She did not make a sound. She knew she was invisible. She just had to wait for him to leave the room. Dominic stopped wiping his hair. He slowly turned his head. His dark eyes locked directly onto the empty space where Arya stood. Her heart stopped. He couldn't see her. It was impossible. "Are you going to stand there and breathe like a scared animal?" Dominic said, his voice low and hard. "Or are you going to tell me what the fuck you are doing in my bathroom?" Arya gasped. She took a step back. Her wet shoes made a squeaking sound on the tiles. Dominic dropped the small towel from his hands. He took 2 long steps toward her. He reached out and his large, hot hand clamped tightly around her invisible wrist. He pulled her hard against his chest. "I asked you a question," he said. "Before we find out what happens between Arya and Dominic, please take a quick second to leave a like on this video if you're enjoying it so far. It really helps the algorithm push more dark romance stories like this out to you. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think Arya should try to fight Dominic and run back out into the dangerous storm, or should she stay and trust the one man who can somehow see her? Also, what do you predict Dominic is going to do once he realizes she's being hunted by his own half-brother? And honestly, have you ever felt completely invisible to the entire world, only for one specific person to finally notice you when you least expected it? Let me know your thoughts down below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story. Let's get back to the penthouse. Arya stared up at him, her mind spun wildly. She looked at his hand holding her wrist. As his skin touched hers, the faint blue glow of the bracelet blinked. Slowly her arm appeared, then her wet clothes and finally her face. The magic faded where he touched her. Dominic stared down at her face, his jaw locked. "Arya." "Let me go," she whispered. She tried to pull her arm back, but he held her tight. His grip hurt. "You broke into my penthouse," Dominic said. He did not let go. In fact, he pulled her even closer. His bare chest felt like a hot iron against her freezing wet shirt. "You slipped past my security, and you were not there a second ago. What kind of sick trick is this?" "It's not a trick," Arya said. She looked at the bathroom door. She expected the men to kick it open at any second. "Please, Dominic, you have to let me hide. They are right outside." "Who the hell is outside?" he demanded. "Men," she said, her voice shaking. "Men with guns. My stepbrother sent them. They found me walking home from work." Dominic's eyes narrowed. He looked her up and down. She looked like a mess. Her hair stuck to her face. Her cheap work clothes were ruined by the rain. She did not look like the corporate spy his half-brother told him about. She looked like a terrified girl. "Why would your stepbrother send men to kill a filing clerk?" Dominic asked. "I'm not just a clerk," Arya shot back. She felt a sudden spark of anger. "And I don't owe you any answers. If you aren't going to help me, then just let me leave. I will take my chances in the storm." "Bullshit," Dominic said. "You aren't going anywhere until you tell me exactly what the fuck is going on. You think you can just appear in my private bathroom and call the shots?" He pushed her gently but firmly backward. Her back hit the cold tiles of the shower wall. He stepped into her space, trapping her between his large body and the glass. He smelled like expensive soap and raw anger. "Tell me," he ordered. "I don't remember everything," Arya yelled, hitting his chest with her free hand. It felt like hitting a brick wall. "I woke up in a hospital a year ago. I didn't know my name. I just had this bracelet. But the memories are coming back, pieces of them. I know my step-family stole my father's company. I know they want me dead so I can never claim it. Dominic stared at her mouth as she spoke. He didn't look like he believed her. And how does that explain how you were invisible? It's the bracelet, she said. She lifted her wrist. During a storm it hides me. I don't know how, it just does, but when you touched me, it stopped working. Dominic reached out with his other hand. He traced his thumb over the old silver metal of the bracelet. A weird look crossed his face. He stared at the small markings on the silver. Where did you get this? His voice dropped to a heavy whisper. I told you I had it when I woke up, Arya said. She watched his eyes. They suddenly looked distant, like he was remembering something from a long time ago. I gave this away when I was 10 years old, Dominic said slowly. He looked back up into her eyes. The cold anger in his face shifted into pure shock. I gave it to a little girl who cried in the rain. Arya felt the air leave her lungs. A flash of a memory hit her mind. A dark garden, heavy rain, a young boy with dark hair and cold eyes putting a piece of metal around her tiny wrist, telling her to stop crying. It was you, she whispered. Dominic did not say a word. He just stared at her. The silence in the bathroom felt heavier than the storm outside. Then a massive crash echoed from the front of the penthouse. Wood splintered. Heavy boots stomped onto the hardwood floors of the living room. Men were shouting. Check the bedrooms, a rough voice yelled. She has to be in here. Arya panicked. They broke in, she choked out. They're going to kill me. Shut up, Dominic hissed. He let go of her wrist and turned off the bathroom lights. The room went pitch black, lit only by the flashes of lightning outside the window. He grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the bathroom into his massive, dark bedroom. He opened a heavy oak closet door. Get in. What about you? Arya asked, her voice shaking. I am going to deal with the trash in my house, he said. Do not make a sound, do not come out, no matter what you hear. Dominic, they have guns, she said. She grabbed his arm. Just use the bracelet with me, we can hide. I don't hide, he said. He pulled his arm away and shut the closet door, leaving her in complete darkness. Arya pressed her hands over her mouth. She backed into the soft clothes hanging in the closet. She could hear Dominic walking out into the hallway. Who the fuck told you it was a good idea to kick down my door? Dominic's loud voice boomed through the quiet penthouse. Back off, Mr. Vance, another man replied. We aren't here for you, we just want the girl. Hand her over and nobody gets hurt. You brought guns into my home, Dominic said. His tone was perfectly calm, which made it sound even more terrifying. You have exactly 3 seconds to turn around and walk out, or I am going to throw you off this balcony. Arya squeezed her eyes shut. She heard a click. It sounded like a gun cocking. Don't be stupid, man, the rough voice said. Your own brother gave us the green light. He said you wouldn't care if we took out the trash. The girl is a spy. She's been stealing your company secrets. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. His brother, Dominic's brother, was working with her step-family. The betrayal made her sick to her stomach. She realized then that she wasn't just fighting for her old life. She was caught in the middle of a war between 2 billionaire brothers. My brother, Dominic said, his voice dropping low, is a piece of shit. And if he sent you here, he sent you to die. Arya heard the sick sound of bone breaking. A man screamed. A gunshot went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space of the penthouse. A vase shattered. Bodies slammed against the walls. Arya shoved the closet doors open. She couldn't just hide while he fought for her. She ran out of the bedroom and peeked down the long hallway. Dominic was standing in the middle of the living room. 2 men were on the floor. One was bleeding from his nose, groaning. The other was holding his arm at a weird angle. A third man was standing near the broken front door, holding a gun pointed right at Dominic's chest. Dominic didn't even look scared. He stood tall, the black towel still wrapped around his waist, blood smeared across his knuckles. Shoot me, Dominic challenged the man. See what happens to your family tomorrow. The man with the gun hesitated. His hand shook. Arya knew she had to do something. The storm outside was howling. She looked at her wrist. The bracelet was glowing bright blue again because Dominic wasn't touching her anymore. She held up her hand. She was completely invisible again. She crept down the hallway. Her bare feet made no sound on the thick rugs. She moved right behind the man holding the gun. He smelled like wet dog and cheap smoke. Arya didn't think, she just acted. She reached out and grabbed the heavy bronze lamp resting on a side table next to the man. Because she was invisible, the lamp looked like it was floating in midair. The man with the gun saw the floating lamp. His eyes went wide. "What the fuck?" he yelled. Arya swung the heavy lamp as hard as she could. It cracked right into the side of the man's head. He dropped the gun and crumpled to the floor like a sack of rocks. The lamp clattered to the ground next to him. Dominic stared at the empty space where Arya stood. He could see the breathing of the room, the slight shift in the air. He stepped forward and picked up the dropped gun. He looked right into the empty air. "Arya." She reached out and placed her hand on his bare chest. Instantly, the magic broke. Her form flickered back into view right in front of him. "I told you to stay in the closet," he said, breathing hard. "I saved your life," she shot back. He looked down at the 3 unconscious men on his expensive rugs. Then he looked back at her. "You made a mess in my living room." "You are welcome," she said, crossing her arms over her wet shirt. She was shivering. The adrenaline was leaving her body, leaving her cold and terrified all over again. Dominic sighed. He grabbed her arm, not hard this time, and pulled her toward the kitchen. "Come here before you freeze to death." He sat her down on a tall stool at the marble island. He walked into a utility room and came back with a heavy, dry sweatshirt. He threw it at her. "Put that on." Arya pulled the oversized black hoodie over her head. It smelled exactly like him. She pulled her knees up to her chest, trying to stop the shaking. Dominic grabbed 2 glasses and a bottle of dark liquor. He poured them both a drink and slid one across the smooth counter to her. "Drink it," he ordered. She picked it up and took a sip. It burned her throat, but it spread a warm feeling in her stomach. Dominic leaned against the counter across from her. He took a long drink from his own glass. He watched her carefully. "My brother set you up," Dominic said flatly. "He told the board you were stealing files. He wanted you fired. Now I know why. He wanted you out on the street so these goons could grab you." "Why would your brother help my step-family?" Arya asked. "Because my brother wants my seat as CEO," Dominic said. He set his glass down hard. "And your step-family controls a massive block of shares in my company. If they vote for him, I lose the company. He must have made a deal with them. He hands you over to them, they give him the votes he needs." Arya stared at the floor. It all made sense. It was all about money and power. They didn't care that she was a real person. They just saw her as a problem to erase. "I have to run," Arya whispered. She looked down at the silver bracelet. "I have to leave the city. If I stay here, they will just keep coming. They will kill me, and they will probably kill you too for getting in the way." "I don't run from fights," Dominic said, "and I don't let people hunt the people who work for me." "I am just a clerk," she yelled, frustration boiling over. "Why do you care?" Dominic walked around the counter. He stopped right in front of her. He reached out and tipped her chin up with his fingers, forcing her to look into his dark eyes. "You are the girl from the garden," he said quietly. "The one who lost everything, just like I did. I made a promise to that little girl. I told her I would protect her. I don't break my promises." Arya felt a tear slide down her cheek. "I don't even know you anymore." "You will," he said. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. "We are going to destroy them, Arya. Every single person who touched you. Every single person who lied. We are going to take back your company, and we are going to burn my brother to the ground. But you have to stop running. You have to stay with me." Arya looked into his eyes. She saw the violent truth there. He wasn't a hero. He was a dangerous man. But right now, he was the only thing standing between her and a shallow grave. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll stay." Dominic's thumb brushed the tear off her cheek. "Good girl." He pulled his hand back and walked over to the unconscious men on the floor. He kicked the one closest to him in the ribs. The man groaned and rolled over. "Wake up," Dominic said coldly. "You have a message to deliver to my brother." "I will stop here for now to ensure the story stays highly detailed and focused on the slow, gritty build-up of the plot and their relationship. We have established the fading magic, the brothers' kidnapping plot, the corporate framing, and brought them to a secure location where the tension is rising." The man on the floor groaned loudly. He rolled onto his back and held his face. Blood poured from his nose and stained the expensive white rug. He blinked hard, trying to focus his eyes. When he saw Dominic standing over him, his face went pale. "Please," the man coughed, spitting a mouthful of blood onto the floor. "I was just doing a job. We didn't know you were home. We just wanted the girl." And now you are doing a new job, Dominic said. He did not raise his voice. He spoke softly, which made the threat sound even worse. He crouched down next to the bleeding man. You are going to stand up. You are going to wake your stupid friends, and you are going to carry them out of my house. Yes, the man rushed to say. Yes, we are leaving right now, I swear. I am not finished, Dominic said. He reached out and grabbed the front of the man's wet jacket. He pulled him up so their faces were only inches apart. You are going to go back to my half-brother. You are going to look Julian right in the eyes, and you are going to tell him that he made the biggest mistake of his life tonight. The man swallowed hard. He nodded fast. I'll tell him exactly what you said. Tell him I am keeping the girl, Dominic continued, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Tell him that if he ever sends another person to look for her, I am going to stop being a businessman. I am going to come to his house and I am going to pull his teeth out one by one. Do you understand? I understand, the man cried out. Shit man, I get it, just let me go. Dominic let go of the jacket and stood up. He watched as the man scrambled to his feet. The man hurried over to his unconscious friends. He kicked one in the leg and slapped the other on the face until they both groaned and started to move. It took them 3 full minutes to stumble toward the broken front door. One of them held his broken arm against his chest, crying quietly. Arya sat frozen on the kitchen stool. She clutched the warm glass of liquor in her hands. She watched the 3 dangerous men limp out of the penthouse like scared dogs. Dominic did not move until the heavy wooden door was pulled shut as far as it could go. The penthouse fell completely silent. The only sound was the heavy rain beating against the large glass windows. Dominic let out a long, heavy breath. He looked down at his hands. His knuckles were split open and bleeding. He turned around and walked to the kitchen sink. He turned the water on high and stuck his hands under the cold stream. The water running down the drain turned a light pink color. Arya slowly slid off the tall stool. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to walk over to him. She stood next to him at the sink. She looked at his bleeding hands, then up at his face. His jaw was still tight. His dark eyes stared blankly at the metal drain. You are bleeding, she said quietly. It's not my blood, Dominic replied. He turned the water off and grabbed a clean dish towel from the counter. He dried his hands roughly, not seeming to care that he was wiping the raw cuts on his skin. Some of it is, Arya pointed out. She reached out and gently touched his wrist. He flinched slightly, but he did not pull away. Why did you do that? Why did you tell Julian you are keeping me? Now he is going to come after you too. Dominic threw the towel onto the counter. He turned his body so he was fully facing her. He looked down at her, taking in her wet hair, the oversized black hoodie and her bare feet. Julian has been coming after me for 10 years, Dominic said. His voice was flat and cold. He hates that our father gave the company to me. He hates that he is the second son. He has tried to ruin my deals. He has tried to steal my clients. But he has never crossed the line into actual violence. Not until tonight. Because of me, Arya whispered. She felt a heavy weight settle in her stomach. My step-family must have offered him a massive deal. They know I am starting to remember things. They know I can prove my father left the company to me before he died. They need me dead before I can go to the lawyers. And Julian needs their votes to kick me off the board, Dominic finished the thought. He leaned his back against the edge of the sink and crossed his arms over his bare chest. It is a smart plan. They use my own security network against you, frame you for stealing, and then wipe you out. They almost won. They will just try again, Arya said. She looked toward the broken front door. The cool air from the hallway was leaking into the warm room. I can't stay here, the door is broken. Anyone can just walk in. I know, Dominic said. He pushed off the counter and walked past her. We are leaving. Arya followed him as he walked quickly down the long hallway toward his bedroom. Leaving? Going where? I have a safe house in Brooklyn, he said over his shoulder. Julian does not know about it. Nobody knows about it. It is just a plain brick building in an old neighborhood. We are going to go there and figure out our next move. He walked into his massive bedroom and went straight to the large walk-in closet. Arya stopped at the doorway. She watched as he pulled a black duffel bag from a top shelf and threw it onto the floor. He started grabbing dark clothes, heavy boots, and thick jackets, tossing them carelessly into the bag. What about my things? Arya asked. I don't have anything, just my wet work clothes. You don't need your things, Dominic said. He zipped the bag shut. If you go back to your apartment, they will be waiting for you. From now on, you wear what I buy you, you eat what I give you, and you stay exactly where I put you. Is that clear? Arya felt a flash of anger hot in her chest. She stepped into the bedroom. I am not a dog, Dominic. You can't just give me orders. He stopped moving. He turned his head and looked at her. His eyes were dark and intense. He took slow, heavy steps toward her until he was standing right in front of her. He looked down, his gaze dropping to the silver bracelet on her wrist. Listen to me very carefully, Dominic said. His voice was dangerously low. You have a target on your back. There are men out there right now looking for you. Men who will put a bullet in your head without thinking twice. I am offering to keep you alive. If you want to survive the week, you will follow my rules. Arya stared back at him. She hated how right he was. She hated that she was helpless without him. Fine, she gritted out, but you don't get to treat me like trash. A corner of Dominic's mouth twitched up, almost like a smile, but it vanished a second later. I treat trash much worse than this, trust me. He walked past her and headed toward a large painting hanging on the far wall of the bedroom. He grabbed the heavy wooden frame and pulled it open like a door. Behind the painting was a dark grey metal safe built directly into the wall. He quickly typed a code into the keypad. The heavy metal door popped open with a quiet click. Arya walked closer, looking over his shoulder. Inside the safe were thick stacks of $100 bills, several black passports, and 2 black handguns resting on a velvet shelf. Dominic grabbed the stacks of cash and stuffed them into his duffel bag. Then he reached for the handguns. He picked one up, checked the metal clip, and slid it into the back of his pants. He picked the second gun up and held it out toward her. Take it, he ordered. Arya stared at the cold, black metal. Her heart started to beat faster. I don't want that. I didn't ask if you wanted it, Dominic said. He grabbed her hand, placed the heavy gun in her palm, and closed her fingers around the grip. You hold it tight. If a man you don't know comes near you, you point it at his chest and you pull the trigger. You don't think, you don't hesitate, you shoot him. Dominic, I can't kill someone, Arya said, her voice shaking. The gun felt way too heavy in her hand. It felt like death. If it is between you and them, you will pull the trigger, he said firmly. Put it in the front pocket of the hoodie. Arya swallowed hard. She slowly lowered the gun and slid it into the large pocket over her stomach. It weighed her down, a terrible reminder of the nightmare she was currently living in. Dominic grabbed the duffel bag and put a clean black t-shirt on over his head. He grabbed a dark leather jacket and threw it on. He looked like a completely different man now. He didn't look like a billionaire CEO. He looked like a street fighter. He looked like a killer. Let's go, he said. He didn't lead her back toward the broken front door. Instead, he walked to the other side of the living room. He opened a plain white door that blended perfectly into the wall. Behind it was a small, private elevator. This goes straight down to my private garage, Dominic explained as he pressed the button. The doors opened immediately. Julian's men probably came up the main elevators. They won't know about this one. They stepped into the small metal box. The doors slid shut, sealing them inside. The elevator started to move down fast. Arya felt her stomach drop. She leaned against the metal wall, hugging her arms around her chest. The gun in her pocket bumped against her stomach. She looked over at Dominic. He was staring straight ahead at the doors. His jaw was locked. He looked ready for a war. Dominic, Arya said quietly. He didn't look at her, but he gave a small nod to show he was listening. The bracelet, she started, her voice barely above a whisper. You said you gave it to a little girl in the rain. Dominic shifted his weight. I did. Why? Arya asked. She stared at the side of his face, searching for any softness. I remember the rain, I remember the garden, I remember being so scared, but I don't remember why you were there or why you gave me this. She held up her wrist, the dull silver metal catching the dim light of the elevator. Dominic finally turned his head to look at her. The coldness in his eyes faded just a little bit. Your father threw a massive party at his estate. My father brought me along. I was 10. You were 8. You were hiding in the garden, crying because your stepmother told you that your real mother hated you and left you on purpose. Arya felt a sharp pain in her chest. The memory hit her like a physical blow. The mean, sharp voice of her stepmother echoing in the dark, the feeling of total loneliness. You were sitting in the mud in your expensive party dress, Dominic continued. You were shaking. I hated parties. I hated the fake people. I went out to the garden to hide and I found you. And you gave me the bracelet, she said softly. My mother gave it to me before she died, he said. The words were blunt, but Arya could hear the old pain in his voice. She told me it was magic. She said it would keep me safe when I felt invisible. When I saw you crying, you looked like you needed it more than I did, so I put it on your wrist. I told you to stop crying and fight back. Arya looked down at the bracelet. It wasn't just a magical object. It was a piece of his mother. It was a piece of his own broken childhood. He gave away his most prized possession just to make a crying girl feel brave. Before she could say anything else, the elevator jerked to a stop. The metal doors slid open. They were in a dark, concrete parking garage. The air smelled like oil and damp earth. A single row of bright overhead lights illuminated 3 massive, expensive cars. "We take the SUV," Dominic said, his voice instantly returning to that cold, commanding tone. He stepped out of the elevator and walked quickly toward a huge, blacked-out vehicle. Arya followed him. She kept her hand wrapped around the gun in her pocket. The thunder boomed loudly outside, vibrating through the thick concrete walls of the garage. The storm was far from over. Dominic unlocked the SUV and threw his bag into the back. He opened the passenger door for her. "Get in. Keep your head down until we are out of the city." Dominic started the engine. It roared loudly in the concrete box. He slammed his foot on the gas and the heavy black SUV shot up the ramp and out into the violent storm. The rain hit the windshield so hard it sounded like rocks. The city streets were almost empty because of the late hour and the terrible weather. Streetlights flashed across Dominic's hard face as he drove. He kept his eyes locked on the road, his jaw tight. Arya sat far back in the leather seat. She pulled her knees up to her chest again, hiding her bare feet under the large black hoodie he gave her. The gun rested heavily against her stomach inside the pocket. It was a cold reminder that her life was completely out of her control now. Arya looked at his bloody knuckles resting on the steering wheel. "You should clean your hands," she said quietly. The sound of the windshield wipers moving back and forth was the only other noise in the car. Dominic didn't look at her. "They are fine." "They are bleeding on your steering wheel," she pointed out. He let out a short, rough breath. "I don't care about the car, Arya. I care about getting us across the bridge before Julian realizes his men failed and sends more." "How many men does he have?" she asked. The fear creeping back into her throat made her voice tight. "Is he running the company or is he running a gang?" "Both," Dominic said bluntly. "Julian uses the company money to pay for his dirty work on the street. Our father always turned a blind eye to it. He thought Julian was just blowing off steam. But I knew Julian was building a network of trash to use against me one day. That is why I kept the safe house." "Does your brother know about the bracelet?" she asked. Dominic shifted gears, speeding past a slow-moving truck. "No, nobody knows about it. My mother only told me its secret before she got sick. After she died, my father married Julian's mother. The new wife hated me. She hated anything that belonged to my real mother. If she knew the bracelet had power, she would have stolen it and sold it." Arya touched the silver metal on her wrist. "But you gave it away. You gave away the last thing you had from your mother, to a stranger." Dominic finally glanced at her. The streetlights caught the dark, intense look in his eyes. "You were not a stranger. Our families were in the same circle. I knew who you were. I knew your stepmother was a total bitch who wanted to break you. I gave it to you because I wanted you to survive her. But then your father died a few years later. Your stepfamily locked you away and I lost track of you." "Until I got a job as a clerk in your building," Arya said. "You didn't just get a job," Dominic corrected her. "You showed up with a fake name and zero memory of who you really were. I didn't recognize you. You were just a quiet girl who sorted files on the 4th floor. It wasn't until Julian started making a big deal about you stealing files that I even looked at your file. And even then, I didn't know it was you until tonight, until I saw the bracelet." The SUV hit a deep puddle, splashing water high into the air. They drove onto the Brooklyn Bridge. The thick metal cables rushed past the windows. The dark water of the river raged below them. "What if I never remember everything?" Arya asked. She stared out the window at the blurry lights of the city. "I know my step-family stole my inheritance. I know they want me dead. But the details, the exact proof, my mind is just empty sometimes. It feels like a thick fog." "We will find the proof," Dominic said. "With or without your memories, I have money. I have people who can dig up dirt on anyone. We will tear your step-family's lives apart until they hand over what belongs to you." "And your brother?" "Julian is going to learn what happens when you bring a gun into my home," Dominic said. His voice was completely empty of emotion, and that scared her more than anything else. He is dead. He just doesn't know it yet. They drove off the bridge and deep into the narrow, dark streets of Brooklyn. The shiny glass buildings of Manhattan were gone. Now there were just old brick warehouses, chain-link fences, and empty sidewalks. The SUV slowed down and turned down a narrow alleyway. The headlights shined on a plain, dirty brick wall. Dominic pushed a small button on the roof of the car. The dirty brick wall slowly rolled up. It was a fake wall hiding a heavy metal garage door. He drove the SUV inside and the door rolled shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. A few seconds later, dull yellow lights clicked on overhead. They were in a small, bare, concrete garage. There was nothing in it except a metal staircase leading up to a heavy steel door. "Get out," Dominic said. He turned off the engine and grabbed his black bag from the back seat. Arya opened her door. The air in the garage was freezing. She shivered violently, hugging the oversized hoodie tighter around her body. Her bare feet hit the cold concrete floor. She followed him up the metal stairs. Dominic unlocked the heavy steel door with 3 different keys. He pushed it open and reached inside to turn on a light switch. The safe house did not look like a billionaire's home. It looked like an old, abandoned factory loft. The floors were scuffed wood. The walls were exposed brick. There was a simple black leather couch, a small kitchen with a dirty sink, and a bed pushed into the far corner of the large room. There were no big windows, just a few small ones near the ceiling covered by thick metal bars. It felt like a prison. "It isn't a 5-star hotel," Dominic said, dropping his bag onto the floor. "But the walls are thick, the doors are solid steel, and nobody is coming through those windows. You are safe here." Arya walked into the middle of the room. She looked around at the dust on the table. "Do you come here often?" "Only when I need to clear my head," he said. He walked over to the kitchen sink and turned on the tap. The water sputtered and coughed before a thin stream of rusty water came out. After a few seconds it turned clear. He stuck his bloody hands under the water. He hissed slightly as the cold water hit his raw knuckles. Arya watched him. He was a ruthless, dangerous man. He just beat 3 men to a pulp and threatened to kill his own brother. But he also gave away his dead mother's magic bracelet to a crying little girl. He was a walking contradiction. And right now he was bleeding because he protected her. She walked over to the kitchen area. She opened a few of the old wooden cabinets until she found a clean rag and a dusty bottle of rubbing alcohol. She set them on the counter next to him. Dominic turned off the water and looked at the bottle. Then he looked at her. "Sit down," Arya said. She pointed to a wooden stool at the small kitchen island. "I can do it myself," he said. "I know you can," she replied, not backing down. "But you can't use your right hand to clean your right hand very well. Just sit down, Dominic." He stared at her for a long second. His jaw ticked. But then he pulled the stool out and sat down. He placed his large, wet hands' palms down on the counter. Arya opened the bottle of alcohol. The strong chemical smell filled the air. She poured a little bit onto the clean rag. She stepped closer to him. She had to stand right between his spread knees to reach his hands properly. She tried to ignore how close their bodies were. She focused entirely on his bruised skin. She gently took his left hand. His skin was warm despite the cold water. She dabbed the wet rag over his split knuckles. Dominic let out a sharp breath through his teeth. His hand twitched, but he didn't pull away. "Sorry," she whispered. "It's going to sting." "I felt worse," he muttered. He looked straight forward, his eyes locked on her stomach. He could clearly see the heavy shape of the gun resting in the front pocket of her hoodie. "You still have the safety on." Arya looked down at her pocket. "I don't even know what a safety is. I told you I don't know how to use a gun." Dominic reached his free hand up and pulled the gun out of her pocket. He flipped a small metal switch on the side of it. "Now it will shoot if you pull the trigger. Keep it close to you when you sleep." He slid the heavy weapon onto the counter next to the bottle of alcohol. Arya swallowed hard. "Okay." She moved to his right hand. This one was worse. The skin was torn badly across his middle knuckles. She poured more alcohol onto the rag and pressed it down firmly to clean out the dried blood. Dominic's breathing got heavier. He looked up from the counter and stared directly into her face. They were so close she could feel the heat radiating off his chest. The black t-shirt he wore clung tightly to his muscles. He smelled like rain, sweat, and cheap alcohol. "Why did you hit that man with the lamp?" Dominic asked suddenly. His voice was quiet, rough. "I told you to stay in the closet." He had a gun pointed at your chest, Arya said softly. She kept wiping his hand, not looking into his eyes. He was going to shoot you. I would have moved, Dominic said. You are not faster than a bullet, she shot back, finally looking up at him. I couldn't just stand there and let him kill you. You were only in that fight because of me. I am in this fight because Julian brought it to my front door, he said. He reached out with his left hand and grabbed her wrist. He didn't grab the silver bracelet. He grabbed the bare skin just below it. Arya froze. The rag stopped moving over his cuts. Dominic rubbed his thumb slowly across her pulse. Her heart was beating incredibly fast. He could feel it fluttering against his skin like a trapped bird. You used the bracelet, he said. You turned invisible, walked right up to a man with a loaded gun, and you hit him. Yes, she whispered. You are crazy, he said. A dark, twisted smirk pulled at the corner of his mouth. You are just a tiny clerk with no memories, and you attacked an armed hitman. I did what I had to do, Arya said. She tried to pull her wrist back, but his grip tightened just enough to keep her there. It didn't hurt, but it was a clear warning that he was in control. Most people would have stayed in the dark and waited for the shooting to stop, Dominic said, his voice dropping lower. His eyes tracked down to her lips. You are not like most people, Arya. You never were. Even when you were 8 years old, you looked like you wanted to burn down the whole garden. I want to burn down my step-family's house now, she admitted. The anger surprised her. It felt hot and dangerous in her chest. They took my life. They took my father's company. I want to make them pay. Good, Dominic said softly. He let go of her wrist and grabbed the front of her large hoodie. He pulled her forward just an inch, closing the tiny bit of space between them. Hold on to that anger. You are going to need it, because when we go back out there we are not going to play nice. We are going to ruin them. Arya looked into his dark eyes. She saw the violent promise there. He wasn't just offering to help her. He wanted to use her anger to feed his own war, and God help her, she wanted to let him. I need dry clothes, she said quietly, breaking the intense stare. She stepped back from between his knees and dropped the bloody rag onto the counter. I am freezing. Dominic blinked, the spell breaking. He cleared his throat and stood up. He walked over to his black bag on the floor and pulled out a pair of grey sweatpants and a long-sleeve white shirt. He threw them onto the small bed in the corner. Put those on, he said. The bathroom is through that door. The water takes a while to get hot. Arya walked over to the bed and picked up the clothes. They were massive, just like the hoodie. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Dominic said. He walked over to the heavy steel door and checked the 3 locks again. Then he picked up the gun from the counter and shoved it back into the waistband of his jeans. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start hunting. Arya nodded. She walked into the small, dirty bathroom and locked the door behind her. The safe house was quiet now, except for the heavy rain beating against the metal roof. Arya stood in front of the cracked mirror over the sink. She looked terrible. Her face was pale, her eyes had dark circles under them, and her wet hair was a tangled mess. She looked down at the silver bracelet on her wrist. It wasn't glowing. There was no magic without the storm, and right now inside these thick brick walls she felt the magic slipping away. The power it gave her was temporary. She couldn't rely on being invisible forever. Eventually she was going to have to stand in the light and face the people who wanted her dead. She stripped off her wet, ruined work clothes and threw them into the trash can. She turned on the shower. Just like Dominic said, the water was freezing cold for a long time before it finally turned lukewarm. She stood under the weak spray, washing the dirt and the fear of the night off her skin. When she stepped out, she quickly dried off with a rough towel and put on Dominic's clothes. The sweatpants were so long she had to roll the bottoms up 4 times just to walk. The white shirt hung off her shoulders. She smelled entirely like him now. It was a strange, comforting scent, like dark wood and danger. She opened the bathroom door and stepped back into the main room. The main lights were turned off. The only light came from a small, cheap lamp on the floor near the couch. Dominic was sitting on the leather couch. He had taken off his leather jacket and his boots. He was leaning back, staring up at the dark ceiling. A half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey sat on the floor next to him. He didn't look at her as she walked out. The bed is yours, he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. Where are you going to sleep? She asked, stopping in the middle of the room. I am not going to sleep, he replied. I am going to watch the door. Arya looked at the heavy steel door, then at him. He looked totally drained. His bruised hands were resting on his stomach. He was a billionaire CEO, used to sleeping on silk sheets, and now he was sitting on a hard leather couch in a freezing warehouse just to make sure nobody killed her. "You need to sleep, Dominic," she said softly. "You drove us here, you fought those men, you can't stay awake forever." "I said I am fine," he snapped, finally looking at her. "Just go to sleep, Arya." Arya didn't move. Her bare feet felt the cold wood floor. She looked at the small bed in the corner, then she looked back at him. "I'm not sleeping in that bed alone, I'm too scared." Dominic's eyes narrowed. "What do you want me to do about it?" "Come lay down," she said. It was a bold request and she knew it, but the thought of lying in the dark by herself, listening to the rain, made her feel like she was going to have a panic attack. "The bed is big enough for 2 people. You can sleep on top of the blankets, just don't make me be over there by myself." Dominic stared at her for a long, heavy minute. The silence stretched between them, thick and tense. He looked at her wrapped in his large clothes, looking small and terrified but still standing her ground. He let out a deep sigh. He picked up the whiskey bottle, took one last long drink from it and set it down hard. He stood up from the couch. "Fine," he muttered. He walked past her and went straight to the bed. He didn't pull the covers back. He just laid down on his back on top of the old quilt. He placed his hands behind his head and closed his eyes. Arya let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She walked over to the other side of the bed. She pulled the thin blanket up and slid underneath it. The mattress was hard and lumpy, but she didn't care. She lay on her side, facing his back. He was a massive wall of heat next to her. She could hear his deep, slow breathing. "Dominic," she whispered into the dark room. "Go to sleep, Arya," he said, his eyes still closed. "Thank you," she said, "for not leaving me in the penthouse." He didn't answer for a long time. Just when she thought he had fallen asleep, his deep voice filled the quiet space. "I told you," he said softly. "I don't break my promises to crying girls in the rain." Bright yellow sunlight cut through the small, barred windows near the ceiling. It hit the dusty wooden floor in long, sharp lines. Arya slowly opened her eyes. Her body felt heavy and stiff from the hard mattress. She blinked a few times, trying to remember where she was. The exposed brick walls and the smell of old wood brought everything rushing back. The men with guns, the fading magic, the safe house. She turned her head on the thin pillow. The other side of the bed was empty. The quilt was pushed back, but the sheets still held the shape of his large body. He had actually stayed next to her all night, just like he promised. Arya sat up. The oversized white shirt slipped off her shoulder. She pulled it back up and looked at the small wooden nightstand next to the bed. The heavy black handgun was sitting right there, perfectly placed so she could reach it quickly. She heard a low, angry voice coming from the kitchen area. Arya pushed the blankets off and swung her legs over the side of the bed. Her bare feet touched the cold floor. She stood up and walked quietly toward the center of the room. Dominic was standing by the dirty kitchen sink. He was wearing the same black t-shirt and dark jeans from last night. He had his back to her. He was holding a cheap plastic cell phone to his ear. He looked tense. His broad shoulders were tight, and his free hand was balled into a fist on the counter. "I don't give a shit what Julian told the board of directors," Dominic said into the phone. His voice was a harsh growl. "You lock down my private servers right now. Change the passcodes. If he tries to move the offshore money, you freeze the accounts and you call me back on this number. Do you hear me? If you let him take over the floor, you are fired. Worse than fired." He listened for a few seconds. The muscles in his back flexed. "No," Dominic snapped. "You do not go to the police. The police are useless right now. Half of them are on Julian's payroll anyway. Just do your damn job and keep the company locked tight until I get back. I will handle my brother." He pulled the phone away from his ear and pressed a button hard. He didn't even put the phone in his pocket. He placed both his hands on the cheap plastic device and snapped it perfectly in half. He threw the broken pieces into the trash can. Arya wrapped her arms around her chest. "Is it bad?" she asked. Dominic turned around quickly. His dark eyes locked onto her. He looked completely exhausted. The dark circles under his eyes were deeper than last night, and dark stubble covered his jaw. He clearly hadn't slept for a single second. "Julian is making his move," Dominic said flatly. He walked away from the sink and went over to his black duffel bag on the floor. "He called an emergency meeting with the board of directors this morning. He told them I am missing. He told them I am having a mental breakdown." "Can he do that?" Arya asked. "He can do whatever he wants if he has the votes," Dominic said. He pulled a fresh black shirt out of the bag. And thanks to your step-family, he has the votes. They are backing him. They are using their shares to push me out. By the end of the day, Julian could be the new CEO. Arya felt a sick feeling in her stomach. It was all happening so fast. What about me? Did he tell them about me? Dominic stopped moving. He looked at her with a grim expression. He told them a lot about you. He went to the police early this morning. He filed a formal report. He claims you stole millions of dollars in secret tech designs from our research department. He told the cops you are a corporate spy who ran away in the middle of the night when you realized you were caught. Arya gasped. She took a step back. That is a complete lie. I was just a filing clerk. I don't even have access to the research department. It doesn't matter what the truth is, Dominic said. Julian fabricated digital trails. He paid off people in the IT department to plant files on your work computer. The police have a warrant out for your arrest right now, Arya. You are a wanted criminal. They are going to put me in jail, she whispered, her hands shaking. No, Dominic said. His voice was cold and sharp. They are not going to put you in jail. If the regular cops catch you, Julian's dirty cops will get to you before you ever see a judge. They will put you in a holding cell and you will end up dead. They will call it a suicide. That is how my brother works. Arya looked down at her wrist. The silver bracelet sat dull and quiet against her skin. She looked up at the high windows. The sky outside was bright blue. There was no rain, there were no clouds. The storm was completely gone. The magic won't work today, she said softly. I can't hide. Good, Dominic said. He walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up his leather jacket. Hiding is for cowards. We are going to fight back, but we can't do it from inside this room. Where are we going? She asked. We need weapons, we need untraceable phones, and we need information, he said. He threw the jacket on over his dark shirt. Get dressed, put the sweatpants back on, roll them up, and put the gun in your pocket again. We leave in 5 minutes. Arya didn't argue. She felt the fear inside her slowly start to turn into a hot, burning anger. They were trying to ruin her life all over again. Her step-family stole her past, and now Julian was trying to steal her future. She walked over to the nightstand, picked up the heavy black gun, and shoved it deep into the front pocket of the oversized hoodie. She quickly changed into the large sweatpants, rolling the bottoms up so she wouldn't trip. She didn't have any shoes. She looked at Dominic, who was watching her get ready. I don't have shoes, she said. Dominic sighed. He walked over to a metal closet near the door and opened it. He dug around at the bottom and pulled out a pair of old, black sneakers. He tossed them onto the floor in front of her. They are going to be huge on you, he said. Tie the laces as tight as you can. We will buy you boots when we get to Queens. Arya slipped her feet into the sneakers. They were huge. She pulled the thick white laces as hard as she could and tied them in tight knots around her ankles. It looked ridiculous, but she could walk. Let's go, Dominic said. He unlocked the heavy steel door and pushed it open. They walked down the metal stairs into the freezing concrete garage. The black SUV was sitting right where they left it. Dominic unlocked it and they both climbed inside. He started the engine and the loud roar echoed off the walls. He pushed the button for the fake brick wall and it slowly rolled up, letting the bright morning sunlight flood into the dark space. Dominic drove out into the narrow alleyway. The streets of Brooklyn were busy now. People were walking on the sidewalks, heading to work. Delivery trucks blocked the narrow roads. It felt like a normal Tuesday morning for the rest of the world, but for Arya it felt like a war zone. You need to keep your head turned away from the windows, Dominic ordered as he steered the heavy truck through the traffic. Julian's face is famous, but people know who I am too. If someone recognizes me, they might take a picture. We need to stay completely under the radar. Arya pulled the large hood of the sweatshirt up over her head. It shadowed her face. She slouched down in the leather seat. Dominic, she said quietly, staring at the dashboard. I was thinking about the files, the ones Julian claims I stole. Don't waste your brain on his lies, Dominic said, checking his rearview mirror. No, listen to me, she insisted. She turned her head slightly to look at him. Before I lost my memory, I remember my father showing me something. He didn't trust my step-family. He knew they were greedy. He told me he kept a separate physical ledger, a black book. It had all the real ownership documents, the original trust funds, and proof that he left everything to me, not them. Dominic glanced at her, his jaw tightened. A physical book in a digital age, that is risky. He said paper can't be hacked, Arya explained. He said if anything ever happened to him, I needed to find the black book. That is the proof we need. If we find that book, we can destroy my step-family. We can prove they forged the new will, and if we destroy them, Julian loses his votes." "Where is the book?" Dominic asked. The tone of his voice changed. He sounded like a predator who just caught the scent of blood. "That is the problem," Arya said, feeling frustrated. "I can't remember the exact location, but I know it is hidden inside my step-family's main house, the big estate in Manhattan. I remember him putting it behind a loose panel in his old study." Dominic hit the brakes hard as a taxi cut in front of them. He cursed under his breath and gripped the steering wheel tightly. "The estate is a fortress," Dominic said. "Your stepbrother has armed guards walking the grounds 24/7. Even I couldn't just walk in there." "I know," Arya said. Her heart started to beat faster as she realized what she had to do. "But I have to get inside. It is the only way to clear my name and take back what is mine." "We will find another way to crush them," Dominic said firmly. "You are not going near that house." "I am not asking for your permission," Arya snapped. The sudden burst of anger surprised her, but it felt good. "You said you wanted to help me fight. This is the fight. I am not going to sit in a dirty warehouse while you do all the heavy lifting. I am going to get my life back." Dominic looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. He saw the terrified girl fading away and a fierce, angry woman taking her place. A small, dangerous smile touched the corner of his mouth. "You are stubborn," he muttered. "I am right," she fired back. Dominic turned his eyes back to the road. "We will talk about breaking into the estate later. First, we need supplies." He drove across the bridge into Queens. The buildings here were older and covered in graffiti. He pulled the SUV down a dirty side street filled with trash cans and parked behind a rusted dumpster. "Leave the gun in your pocket," Dominic said as he turned off the engine. "Keep your hands inside the hoodie. Don't speak to anyone. I will do the talking." Arya nodded. She pulled the hood down further over her face and stepped out of the car. The morning air was cold. The oversized sneakers slapped awkwardly against the concrete as she followed him toward a small, run-down storefront. The sign above the door was broken, but it faintly read electronics and repair. The windows were covered in heavy metal grates. Dominic pushed the glass door open. A little bell rang above their heads. The inside of the shop smelled like cigarette smoke and old dust. The shelves were packed with junk. Old radios, broken laptops, and tangled cords were everywhere. Behind a glass counter sat an old man with a thick grey beard and a dirty baseball cap. He was smoking a cigarette and staring at a small, boxy television on the wall. The man slowly turned his head. When he saw Dominic, his eyes widened slightly. He put the cigarette down in an overflowing glass ashtray. "Mr. Vance," the old man said. His voice was scratchy. "I didn't expect to see you on this side of the bridge today." "I need 3 burner phones, fully clean," Dominic said. He walked right up to the counter. He didn't waste time with small talk. "And I need a new laptop, untraceable IP, cash." The old man nodded slowly. "I can do that. Going to cost you extra for the rush, though." "I don't care about the price, Sal," Dominic said, reaching into his leather jacket. He pulled out a thick stack of $100 bills from the safe house and tossed it onto the glass counter. "Just give me the gear." Sal grabbed the money quickly and shoved it under the counter. He turned around and started opening small metal drawers behind him. Arya stood a few steps behind Dominic. She kept her hands deep in her pockets, her fingers resting gently on the cold metal of the gun. She felt out of place. She felt like everyone was staring at her. She lifted her head slightly and looked at the small television on the wall. The volume was turned down very low, but the local news was playing. A female news anchor was sitting at a desk, looking serious. Then the screen changed. A picture flashed across the television. It was Arya. It was a still frame taken from the security cameras inside the corporate office. She was wearing her cheap grey work skirt and a white blouse. She was carrying a stack of files. The words "wanted for questioning" flashed in big red letters across the bottom of the screen. Arya stopped breathing. Her chest froze. Seeing her own face on the news labeled as a criminal made it all incredibly real. It wasn't just a threat anymore. The whole city was looking for her. The text at the bottom of the screen changed to read, "Arya Thorne's suspect in multi-million-dollar corporate theft." They used her real last name, not the fake name she used to get the job. Julian knew exactly who she was. Dominic noticed her silence. He turned his head and followed her gaze. He saw the television screen. His jaw locked instantly. Sal placed 3 cheap plastic phones and a heavy black laptop on the counter. He looked up at Dominic, then looked over at the TV. Sal squinted his eyes, looking back and forth between the screen and the girl hiding in the oversized hoodie. The tension in the dirty shop spiked. The air felt suddenly too thick to breathe. "That girl on the news," Sal said slowly, his voice dropping. "She looks an awful lot like the company you keep, Mr. Vance." Dominic didn't hesitate. He reached across the glass counter with lightning speed. His large hand grabbed the front of Sal's dirty shirt, twisting the fabric tight. He yanked the old man violently forward so Sal's chest slammed against the glass. "You didn't see anyone with me today, Sal," Dominic said. His voice was a deadly, quiet whisper. "You sold me some phones, you took my money, and you watched a sports game on your TV. That is the only story you know." Sal choked slightly, his hands gripping Dominic's thick wrist. "I swear to God, Mr. Vance, I didn't see a damn thing, just you." "Good," Dominic said. He shoved the man backward. Sal stumbled and hit the shelves behind him. Dominic grabbed the phones and the laptop. He turned to Arya. "Walk to the car, fast." Arya didn't need to be told twice. She spun around and pushed the glass door open. The little bell rang again. She walked as fast as she could in the huge sneakers back to the alleyway. Dominic was right behind her. He threw the electronics into the back seat and practically shoved her into the passenger side. He slammed the door, ran to the driver's side, and jumped in. He started the engine and sped out of the alley before the old man could even think about picking up a phone. Arya pulled the hood off her head. She was breathing hard. Panic was clawing at her throat. "He saw me. He knows who I am." "Sal won't talk," Dominic said, steering the SUV aggressively through the tight streets. "He knows what I will do to him if he does, but we can't stay out in the open anymore. Your face is everywhere." Julian moved faster than I thought. "They used my real name," Arya said, her voice shaking. "If my step-family sees that news report, they will know Julian failed to kill me last night. They will know I am still alive." "Which means they are going to panic," Dominic said. A dark look crossed his face. "People make mistakes when they panic." "Or they tighten their security," Arya argued. She looked over at him. The fear was fading, replaced by that burning need to survive. "Dominic, we don't have time to wait. If they panic, they might destroy the black book. They might burn the only proof I have." Dominic gripped the steering wheel. He knew she was right, but the thought of letting her walk into a mansion full of armed men made his blood run cold. "You want to break into a heavily guarded estate tonight," Dominic stated, keeping his eyes on the road. "A place where the men have orders to shoot you on sight." "Yes," Arya said firmly. "With no magic bracelet to hide you," he added. "I don't need magic to hide in the dark," she said. She reached down and touched the heavy gun in her pocket. "And I won't be completely helpless." Dominic finally looked at her. He saw the fierce determination in her posture. She wasn't the crying girl from the garden anymore. She was a woman ready to go to war. He let out a long, heavy sigh. "Fine," Dominic said. "We break into the estate tonight, but we do it my way." Dominic did not drive back to the brick-safe house. Instead, he steered the heavy SUV toward an old, rusted train yard on the edge of Queens. He parked the truck out of sight, deep between 2 empty cargo train cars. He turned off the engine but left the heat running. He grabbed the heavy black laptop from the back seat and placed it on his lap. He flipped it open. The bright screen lit up the dark inside of the car. Arya watched him. His large hands moved over the keys incredibly fast. He didn't look like a street fighter right now. He looked like the brilliant billionaire CEO who built a massive tech empire, lines of code reflected in his dark eyes. "What are you doing?" she asked, pulling her knees up to her chest. "I am pulling the security blueprints for your step-family's estate," Dominic said without looking away from the screen. "Julian's men installed their new camera systems last year. My company built the software. I left a back door in the code just in case I ever needed to look around." "You spy on your own clients?" Arya asked. "I keep leverage on everyone," Dominic corrected her. "In my world, you don't survive by playing nice. You survive by holding a knife to the throat of the person shaking your hand." Arya shivered, but not from the cold. He was so casual about being ruthless, but right now, his ruthlessness was the only thing keeping her breathing. He hit a final key and a detailed blue map filled the screen. It was a perfect layout of the massive Thorn estate. Little red dots blinked on the screen, showing the exact locations of the security cameras. "Look at this," Dominic said, leaning the screen toward her. "They have cameras covering every gate, the front doors, and the back patio, but they have a blind spot near the old greenhouse on the west side. The trees are too thick there." Arya leaned closer, her shoulder pressed against his thick leather jacket. She stared at the blue lines, memories sparked in her mind. "The greenhouse," she whispered. "My father used to grow orchids in there. There is a small side door right past the glass walls. It leads straight into the kitchen hall. The staff used it to bring in flowers." "Is the door alarmed?" Dominic asked. "It used to have a simple keypad," she said. She closed her eyes, trying to force the numbers to appear in her foggy brain. 4 digits, my father's birth year. 1968. Dominic looked at her. "If they change the code, the alarm will go off the second we pull the handle, and we will have 10 armed guards running at us." "We have to risk it," Arya said, opening her eyes. "Once we are inside, the study is on the 2nd floor. We just have to go up the back stairs. My stepbrother's room is on the other side of the house. He won't hear us." "Okay," Dominic said. He closed the laptop and shoved it into the back seat. He grabbed one of the cheap plastic burner phones and tossed it into her lap. "Keep that in your pocket. My number is saved in it. If we get separated, you call me. You don't try to be a hero, you hide and you call me." "I understand," she said. Dominic shifted in his seat. He looked down at the heavy shape of the gun in the front pocket of her oversized hoodie. "Take it out." Arya swallowed hard. She reached into the pocket and pulled out the heavy black gun. She held it awkwardly with 2 hands, making sure the barrel was pointed at the floor of the car. "You hold it like it is made of glass," Dominic said. His voice was strict. "It is not a toy, Arya, it is a tool, and tonight you might have to use it." "I told you I don't know how," she said. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Then I am going to teach you," he said. He reached over the center console. "Give it to me." She handed it to him quickly, glad to have it out of her hands. Dominic checked the side of the weapon, then quickly slid the metal clip out of the bottom. He pulled the top part back, making sure there was no bullet inside the chamber. He handed the empty gun back to her. "It is completely empty now," he said. "Hold it up, point it at the dashboard." Arya raised the gun. It felt incredibly heavy at the end of her arms. Dominic let out an annoyed breath. He undid his seatbelt and leaned his large body over the console. He was right in her space. His chest pressed against her shoulder. He reached his large, rough hands over hers. He adjusted her fingers, wrapping her right hand high on the grip and placing her left hand tightly around it to support the weight. "Don't lock your elbows," he murmured. His face was only an inch from her cheek. He smelled like leather and danger. "Keep your arms slightly bent to absorb the kick. If you lock your arms, the gun will fly back and hit you in the face." Arya bent her arms slightly. Her heart was hammering in her chest, and she wasn't sure if it was from the gun or from how close he was. "Now," Dominic said softly, his eyes tracking her face. "Look down the metal sights on the top. Line up the front dot with the gap in the back." She focused on the metal. She aimed at the radio dial on the dashboard. "Squeeze the trigger slowly," he ordered. "Don't jerk your finger, just squeeze." Arya pulled her finger back. The gun made a loud, sharp click. She flinched. "Again," Dominic said. He didn't move away. He stayed close, his hands still resting over hers. "Keep your eyes open. Don't look away from the target." She pulled the trigger again. Click, she didn't flinch this time. "If a man comes at you tonight," Dominic said, his voice dropping to a dark, serious whisper, "you don't aim for his legs, you don't aim for his arms. You aim right for the center of his chest and you pull the trigger until he stops moving. Do you hear me?" Arya looked away from the dashboard and turned her head to look at him. They were so close their noses almost touched. His dark eyes were burning with a fierce intensity. He wasn't playing a game. He was preparing her for a deadly reality. "I hear you," she whispered. "Good," he said. He finally pulled away and sat back in his seat. He took the empty gun from her hands, slammed the loaded clip back into the bottom and handed it back. "Put it in your pocket. We wait here until it gets completely dark." They sat in the car for hours. The sun slowly fell behind the dirty buildings of Queens, painting the sky a bruised purple before turning pitch black. The city lights flickered on. It was cold, and the silence in the car was heavy with nervous energy. Arya kept her hand in her pocket, resting her fingers on the cold metal of the gun. She thought about her step-family. She thought about the fake smiles they wore at her father's funeral, right before they locked her away and stole everything. The anger flared in her chest again, hot and bright. It chased the fear away. "It is time," Dominic finally said. He started the SUV and drove out of the train yard. He headed back toward Manhattan. The drive felt different this time. They weren't running away. They were walking straight into the fire. The Thorne estate was located in one of the richest neighborhoods in the city. The streets here were wide, clean, and lined with massive trees. There were no dirty alleyways or broken streetlights. Dominic parked the SUV 3 blocks away from the estate, hiding it under the shadow of a large oak tree. "We walk from here," Dominic said. He pulled a black beanie from his pocket and pulled it over his dark hair. He looked at her. "Keep your hood up. Stay right behind me. If I stop, you stop. If I tell you to run, you run." Arya nodded. She pulled the hood of her sweatshirt up and followed him out of the car. The night air was freezing. The oversized sneakers felt heavy on her feet, but she forced herself to walk quietly. They moved through the shadows of the large houses, sticking to the dark spots between the streetlights. Every time a car drove past, Dominic pulled her hard against a stone wall or behind a thick bush until the headlights vanished. Finally, they reached the edge of the Thorne estate. A massive 10-foot-high stone wall surrounded the entire property. Thick iron spikes lined the top. Dominic crouched down in the dark bushes near the wall. He pointed toward the right. Arya looked. Through the iron gates, she could see 2 large men walking slowly down the paved driveway. They were wearing thick black coats and carrying large flashlights. They had handguns strapped to their legs. "They take their patrol seriously," Dominic whispered. He looked up at the wall. "We need to get over this without making a sound." He stood up and pressed his back against the stone. He laced his fingers together and held his hands down low. "Step on my hands, I will push you up. Grab the edge between the spikes and wait for me." Arya didn't hesitate. She stepped her large sneaker into his hands. Dominic grunted slightly and boosted her straight up. She grabbed the cold stone at the top of the wall, carefully avoiding the sharp iron spikes. She pulled her upper body over the edge and lay flat on the cold stone, holding her breath. A second later, Dominic jumped up, grabbed the top of the wall with his bare hands, and pulled his massive body up with pure muscle. He didn't even make a sound. He swung his legs over the spikes and dropped lightly onto the soft grass on the other side. He reached his arms up to her. Arya slid off the wall and fell into his arms. He caught her easily, setting her on her feet. They were inside. The estate grounds were huge. Perfectly cut lawns stretched out toward a massive 3-story mansion made of white stone. Lights were glowing in several of the downstairs windows. Dominic pointed to his left, the greenhouse. They moved quickly through the shadows of the tall trees. Arya's heart pounded against her ribs. Every snap of a twig sounded like a gunshot to her ears. She kept her hand in her pocket, gripping her gun tight. They reached the edge of the large glass greenhouse. It looked abandoned, exactly like she remembered. The glass was dirty, and wild plants pressed against the panes from the inside. They crept along the side of the glass wall until they reached a small, heavy wooden door. Next to the door was a digital keypad. The numbers were worn out from age. Dominic stepped aside. He looked at her. "Your turn." Arya took a deep breath. She stepped up to the keypad. Her fingers shook as she reached out. She pressed the 1, then the 9, 6, 8. The small light on top of the keypad flashed green. A loud click echoed from the lock. It worked. They hadn't changed the code. Dominic pushed the heavy wooden door open slowly. It creaked slightly, but the sound was masked by the wind. They stepped inside the dark hallway. The air inside smelled like expensive floor wax and old wood. "The back stairs are this way," Arya whispered, pointing down the long, dark hall. They walked as quietly as possible. The house was dead silent. They passed the massive, dark kitchen. It looked like a restaurant kitchen, all stainless steel and spotless counters. They reached the narrow back staircase meant for the staff. Dominic went first. He pulled his own gun from the back of his pants and held it ready. He took the wooden stairs one by one, checking the landing before signaling for her to follow. They reached the second floor. The hallway here was covered in a thick, expensive red carpet that completely hid the sound of their footsteps. Beautiful paintings hung on the walls. It was a beautiful house, but to Arya it felt like a nightmare. "The study is at the end of the hall," she whispered, pointing to a set of heavy double doors made of dark oak. Dominic nodded. They moved quickly down the hall. They stopped right outside the double doors. Dominic pressed his ear against the thick wood. He listened for a full 10 seconds. He held up one finger, then pointed to the door. Someone was inside. Arya felt her blood run cold. She expected the room to be empty. It was past midnight. Dominic didn't back down. He grabbed the brass door handle with his left hand and held his gun up with his right. He looked at Arya, making sure she was ready. She pulled her gun out of her pocket and held it with both hands, just like he taught her. Dominic turned the handle fast and shoved the heavy doors open. They rushed into the room, guns raised. The study was massive. Walls of books reached the high ceiling. A large, dark wood desk sat in the middle of the room, and sitting behind the desk, holding a glass of brown liquor, was her stepbrother, Marcus. Marcus looked up, his eyes widening in pure shock as he saw a massive, dark-haired man and his supposed-to-be-dead stepsister pointing guns at him. Arya, Marcus gasped, dropping his glass. It shattered on the expensive rug. "Don't make a sound, Marcus," Dominic said. His voice was a deadly, cold growl. He aimed his gun right at the center of Marcus's forehead. "If you yell for your guards, I will put a bullet in your brain before they even open the door." Marcus slowly raised his hands in the air. His face turned paper white. You're supposed to be dead. Julian said his men took care of you last night." "Julian is a liar," Arya said. She stepped out from behind Dominic. Her hands were shaking, but she kept her gun pointed straight at his chest. "And you are a thief." "Are you crazy?" Marcus said, his voice cracking. He looked at Dominic, recognizing the famous CEO. "Mr. Vance, what the hell are you doing with her? She is a wanted criminal. It's all over the news." "Shut the fuck up," Dominic ordered. He walked quickly around the large desk and grabbed Marcus by the front of his expensive silk shirt. He yanked him out of the leather chair and shoved him hard against the wall of books. He jammed the cold barrel of his gun under Marcus's chin. "You are going to tell us exactly where the black book is, right now." Marcus choked, his eyes wide with pure terror. "I don't know what you are talking about. What book?" "My father's ledger," Arya said, stepping closer. The anger in her voice was so thick it surprised her. "The real will, the proof that you and your mother stole this company from me." "We didn't steal anything," Marcus cried out. "He left it to us. You were too weak to run the company." Dominic didn't waste time arguing. He slammed the heavy metal side of his gun into the side of Marcus's knee. Marcus screamed in pain, dropping to the floor. He clutched his knee, tears streaming down his face. "Fuck, you broke my leg." "I will break the other one if you lie to me again," Dominic said calmly, standing over him. "Where is the book?" Marcus looked up at them, completely broken. "We burned it," he sobbed. "My mother found it behind the loose panel a year ago. She burned it in the fireplace. It's gone, Arya, your proof is gone." Arya felt the room spin. The air left her lungs. They burned it. The only proof she had to clear her name and take back her life was reduced to ashes. She lowered her gun, staring at her crying stepbrother in total defeat. Suddenly, a loud, blaring siren erupted through the entire house. Red lights began flashing in the hallway outside the study. Dominic cursed violently. He grabbed Arya's arm. "Someone tripped the silent alarm. The guards are coming." Before they could run for the door, the heavy double doors of the study burst open. 3 men in black tactical gear rushed in, raising automatic weapons. "Drop your weapons," the lead guard screamed over the blaring siren. "Drop them now or we fire." The loud, blaring siren echoed in Arya's ears. Red light flashed into the study from the hallway, painting the walls like blood. The 3 guards filled the doorway. Their dark rifles were pointed right at them. Dominic did not drop his gun. He did not even look scared. He moved faster than Arya could blink. He grabbed the back of Marcus's expensive silk collar and yanked him hard off the floor. Marcus screamed in pain as his broken knee dragged against the rug. Dominic pulled the crying man in front of his own body like a human shield. He jammed the cold barrel of his gun directly into the side of Marcus's head. "Take one more step," Dominic roared over the siren, "and you can explain to his mother why you let him die." The 3 guards froze. They kept their rifles raised, but their fingers stopped pulling the triggers. They looked at each other, unsure of what to do. They were paid to protect the Thorne family. If they shot the son, they would be dead men anyway. "Help me," Marcus sobbed. Tears and snot ran down his face. "He broke my leg, don't let him kill me." "Shut your damn mouth," Dominic hissed. He looked at the lead guard. "Lower the weapons, kick them across the floor now." The lead guard's jaw tightened. You are not walking out of here, Vance. The whole house is awake. The police are already on their way. If you kill him, you get the chair. I don't care about the police, Dominic said. His voice was a flat, dead calm that cut right through the noise of the siren. I will count to 3. 1. Arya stood frozen behind the large wooden desk. Her hands gripped her heavy black gun so tight her knuckles were white. She aimed it toward the doorway just like Dominic taught her, but her arms were shaking wildly. She felt completely out of her depth. This wasn't a movie. These men were really going to shoot them. 2, Dominic said. He pulled the hammer back on his handgun. The sharp click echoed loudly. Marcus completely panicked. The sound of the gun cocking right next to his ear broke his mind. He thrashed wildly, throwing his arms out and throwing his heavy body weight forward to get away from the barrel. Dominic's boots slipped slightly on the expensive rug. His grip on Marcus's collar loosened for just a split second. It was all the lead guard needed. Fire, the guard yelled. Dominic shoved Marcus forward with all his strength, throwing the crying man directly into the line of fire. Then Dominic threw himself sideways, diving behind a massive leather reading chair. The sound of the automatic rifles was deafening. It sounded like an explosion going off inside a tin can. Arya screamed and dropped flat on her stomach behind the heavy oak desk. Bullets ripped through the room. They shredded the thick books on the walls. Pages exploded into the air like snow. Splinters of wood flew everywhere. Marcus screamed a terrible, wet sound. Then he hit the floor and stopped moving. Arya covered her head with her arms. The noise was physically painful. Wood chunks rained down on her back. The air instantly filled with the harsh, burning smell of gunpowder and dust. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Arya, Dominic's voice boomed from the other side of the room. Shoot back. She opened her eyes. The heavy desk was keeping her alive, but the bullets were chewing through the thick wood. It wouldn't hold forever. She looked down at her hands. She was still holding the gun. She remembered his voice in the dark car. You don't aim for his legs. You aim right for the center of his chest, and you pull the trigger until he stops moving. Arya gritted her teeth. She rolled onto her knees. She peeked around the edge of the large desk. 2 of the guards were shooting blindly at the leather chair where Dominic was hiding. The chair was being ripped to pieces. The 3rd guard was walking slowly toward the desk. He was coming for her. He was only 10 feet away. He wore a black helmet and a thick tactical vest. He saw her peek around the desk and he swung his heavy rifle toward her face. Arya didn't think. She pushed the gun out in front of her, keeping her arms slightly bent. She lined up the metal sights right with the center of his black vest. She pulled the trigger. The gun bucked hard in her hands. The loud crack made her ears ring. The bullet hit the guard squarely in the chest. Because he was wearing a heavy vest, the bullet didn't go through him, but the pure force of the impact hit him like a sledgehammer. He gasped, dropping his rifle, and stumbled backward. He tripped over Marcus's body and fell hard onto his back. Before the other 2 guards could turn to see what happened, Dominic popped up from behind the ruined leather chair. He didn't hesitate. He fired twice, 2 sharp, perfectly aimed shots. Both guards dropped to the floor instantly. The deafening roar of the automatic rifles finally stopped. The sudden silence in the room was worse than the noise. The siren was still blaring outside in the hallway, but inside the study, the only sound was the heavy, ragged breathing of the people still alive. Thick grey smoke floated in the air. Arya stared at the man she just shot. He was groaning on the floor, holding his chest, trying to catch his breath. She had actually pulled the trigger. She had actually tried to kill someone. Her stomach rolled violently. She felt like she was going to throw up. Dominic walked quickly across the ruined room. He kicked the dropped rifles far away from the men on the floor. He stopped in front of Arya and grabbed her upper arm, pulling her roughly to her feet. Are you hit? He demanded, looking her up and down. His dark eyes searched her face, her chest, her legs. No, she choked out. She couldn't stop staring at the bodies on the floor. I shot him, Dominic, I shot him. You kept yourself alive, Dominic said firmly. He gave her arm a hard shake to break her out of her shock. Look at me, Arya, look at me. She finally tore her eyes away from the floor and looked up at his hard face. More guards are coming, he said. The harsh truth in his voice brought her back to reality. The cops are coming. We have 30 seconds to get out of this house before we are trapped. Move. He didn't let go of her arm. He dragged her toward the large glass windows at the back of the study. He didn't even bother to open them. He raised his gun and shot the heavy glass twice. The window shattered into a million tiny pieces, falling out into the dark night. Cold wind rushed into the smoky room. Dominic used his leather jacket to clear the sharp glass from the bottom frame. Climb out. It is a straight drop to the patio below. Bend your knees when you hit the ground. Arya shoved her gun back into her front pocket. She climbed up onto the window sill. She looked down. It was a second-story drop. It looked incredibly high in the dark, but she could hear heavy boots running down the hallway outside the study. Men were shouting. She didn't wait. She slid off the edge and dropped. The wind rushed past her ears. She hit the stone patio hard. Pain shot up her legs and she tumbled forward, scraping her hands on the rough stone. She bit her lip to keep from screaming. A second later, Dominic landed next to her in a heavy crouch. He didn't fall. He stood right up, grabbed her by the back of her oversized hoodie and hauled her to her feet. "Run," he ordered. They sprinted across the perfectly cut lawn. The red flashing lights from the house cast long, crazy shadows across the grass. The siren was so loud it felt like it was inside Arya's head. Her chest burned with every breath. The oversized sneakers slapped awkwardly against the ground, but she forced her legs to move as fast as they could. They reached the massive stone wall. Up, Dominic grunted. He locked his hands together again. Arya stepped in and he launched her up. She grabbed the cold stone, ignoring the pain in her scraped hands, and threw herself over the top. She didn't even try to land gracefully this time. She just fell into the dark bushes on the other side of the wall. Dominic came over a second later, landing softly in the dirt next to her. "To the car," he said, breathing heavy. They scrambled out of the bushes and ran down the dark, quiet street. Dogs in the neighboring houses were barking wildly at the sound of the alarms. Lights were turning on in the expensive mansions. The whole neighborhood was waking up. They reached the shadow of the large oak tree. Dominic unlocked the black SUV. They threw the doors open and climbed inside. Dominic started the engine and slammed his foot on the gas. The heavy truck leaped forward, speeding down the road with the headlights completely turned off. He took 3 sharp turns, putting as much distance between them and the estate as possible, before he finally flipped the headlights back on. Arya sat in the passenger seat. She was shaking uncontrollably. Her hands were covered in dirt and small cuts. Her knees throbbed from the fall. She pulled her legs up to her chest and buried her face in her knees. They drove in complete silence for a long time. Dominic navigated the dark streets with a tight grip on the wheel. He kept checking the rearview mirror, waiting for the flashing blue and red lights of police cars to appear behind them. None did. They had gotten away. But it didn't feel like a victory. "It's gone," Arya whispered into the dark car. She didn't lift her head. "The book is gone." Dominic shifted gears. He didn't say anything to comfort her. He knew words wouldn't help right now. "My mother burned it," Arya continued, her voice cracking. "All that risk, all that fighting, and for what? My proof is ashes. I can't clear my name. I can't take the company back. I'm just going to be a wanted criminal for the rest of my life." She felt hot tears slip down her cheeks. She hated crying. She hated feeling weak. But the weight of it all was finally crushing her. She shot a man tonight. She watched her stepbrother get gunned down by his own guards. She broke every rule she ever knew and she still lost. Dominic drove the SUV onto the entrance ramp of the highway, heading back toward the safe house in Brooklyn. He finally looked over at her. "Stop crying," he said. His voice wasn't mean, but it was strict. Arya lifted her head. She wiped her dirty hands across her wet cheeks, leaving streaks of mud on her pale face. "How can you say that? We have nothing." "We are alive," Dominic said bluntly. "That is not nothing, and we learned something very important tonight." "What?" she asked bitterly. "That bullets hurt." "We learned that your stepmother is the one pulling the strings," Dominic said. He stared at the dark road ahead. His mind was working fast, spinning a new web. Marcus was terrified. He was just a stupid kid playing with money he didn't earn. But the mother, she was the one smart enough to find the hidden book. She was the one ruthless enough to burn it. She is the brain of the operation. "So what?" Arya said. "She burned the proof. Knowing she is smart doesn't help us." "Yes, it does," Dominic said. A dark, dangerous energy filled the inside of the car. "Paper can burn, Arya, but people can be broken. If she is the one who forged the new will, then she is the one who knows exactly how it was done. She knows where the fake documents were filed. She knows who she paid off." Arya stared at him. You want to go after her? I don't need a black book to prove you on the company, Dominic said. He turned his head and looked her right in the eyes. The streetlights flashed across his sharp face. I just need your stepmother to stand in front of a camera and confess to everything she did. She will never do that, Arya said. She hates me. She would rather die than give me my life back. Everyone talks eventually, Dominic stated. He turned his eyes back to the road. She just needs the right motivation. Julian thinks he won today. Your step-family thinks they are safe. Tomorrow we are going to show them that the game is just starting.